So a woman, when she says she wants the man to talk more, be more sensitive and express himself, she doesn't want that. She doesn't want to feel a man's fears and feelings that will make her feel unsafe.
I came across you and thought, what a fascinating concept. A high achieving woman helping high achieving men and be better in their relationships.
Found a lot of my bosses, my clients would come to me for certain things, manage stress. But what I realized after a while that a lot of these men didn't want their work stress taken away. What they were really coming to me with was the relationship stress that they were dealing with at home.
I just watched the dynamics occurring with dating. Young boys, particularly in their 20s now, haven't been educated in terms of how to be a man and what a man means. Sasha, welcome to the UltraGrowth podcast. Thanks for joining.
Thanks you for having me. Great to be here.
Yeah, absolutely. I came across you and I thought, what a fascinating concept. A high achieving woman helping high achieving men and be better in their relationships. But I have to ask you, how did you come to this work?
It's a good question. I never grew up thinking that I was going to do this. I used to work in executive sales in the corporate world. So I used to work with a lot of men in very male dominated industries. And initially, this program was to help them with their stress because I had done a lot of personal developments, a lot of things in my personal life that helped me achieve and manage stress in the corporate world. So I found a lot of my bosses, my clients would come to me for certain things. So I developed a program to help men in this space manage stress. But what I realized after a while that a lot of these men didn't want their work stress taken away. They love the work stress. What they were really coming to me with on a sort of covert level was the relationship stress that they were dealing with at home and the problems they couldn't solve, and maybe the things that they didn't want to really reveal or talk about um, in that space. But it was causing a lot of stress for them, which the work stress was helping them cope with. Right. So this took me on a journey. Through that, I developed a lot of tools and I worked with a medical company to really create a scientific backing to this because primarily I only work with the man in order to save their marriage. So the work that I do works not just on a mental consciousness level, which is the 5%. We can't really do much with this. It works on a nervous system level and a hormonal level. The way to change this is through changing our emotions, right? So that's sort of a story to how this came to be.
How do you find being a woman yourself may create challenges in terms of when you're helping your clients?
So essentially, the men that come to me probably are not going to reveal this sort of stuff with another man. They tend to be men in leadership roles from business to military. I work internationally, mostly online. So they're very discreet about these problems and they're likely not going to reveal things about their personal relationship and their intimacy to another man. And I recommend that men don't necessarily do this because it can sometimes perpetuate the wound. Because on a core level, men have a vulnerability when it comes to women, right? There's this fear of rejection. And this is why they're building all this stuff in order to build up the castle not to be rejected by their intimate partner or woman. So it's actually healing to go through this process. It's part of the healing process. Whereas working with a man will create more tools or strategies and essentially create more fear between men and women. So I don't see this working effectively any other way. The other interesting thing is anything that comes up in the coaching container, any problems, any resistance, is actually what's coming up in their intimate relationship. So we're actually recreating their marriage dynamic, essentially, then working with a woman, but obviously on platonic and neutral level. This is something that they're not going to achieve working with a man or in a boy with men, right? These things don't come to the surface. So it is a very powerful process. And I guess a container these types of male clients feel safe in.
And how do you ensure that, a lot of these men are type A, they're used to getting maybe what they want. In the world we operate in, boundaries can be unclear. Like, how do you ensure that your boundaries are kept and that they do not inadvertently enmesh themselves with you? And how do you prevent your own stuff coming up in that relationship? Because I would and could imagine that it could become quite intense, and there's a male and female dynamic there. Like, how do you manage that? That to me seems like it could be a minefield.
I love this question. It's a great question. And what happens here, the way that I communicate with them and what we're dealing with is what is the opposite of polarity and what needs to happen in their personal relationship. So, what creates attraction between a man and a woman is not so much our physical body, the way we look, it's the way that we communicate and the roles we're in. This shifts the hormones. Because I am essentially coaching them, this already takes away half the polarity. They're sharing their vulnerabilities, their emotions, and their feelings, which they need to learn and understand in order to lead their woman. Okay. So when this occurs, it's depolarized. This means the attraction is taken away. Polarity, when there's a negative and a positive that want to come together and attract like two magnets. In order to create polarity, the man needs to be the leader. He's the natural leader. And although these men are leaders at work, they're no longer leading at home. Okay. They're either extremely passive, their wife has taken the reins and resents them for it. She's taking on control that she doesn't want, or they become a dictator. So they're not leading, they're not feeling in their heart. So essentially, the polarity is reversed here, which takes away any of the attraction. This is an amazing thing to experience because naturally in the workplace, there will be a level of polarity between men and women. A lot of affairs occur between the boss and his secretary. Why? Because there's a lot of polarity. He's the leader, he's telling her what to do, she assists him, she asks for permission. This role is very different, right? It is the way that we can neutralize it, but also understand what to do. So as the man continues to work with me, potentially after 3 months, once the relationship was resolved, and potentially we're working on other areas of his life, I take on more of a guiding role and a little bit more polarity is created. So essentially, this is what creates the safety and the boundaries. I really liked your question because when I worked with a medical company, I worked with a lot of doctors, psychologists to develop this program. What would occur with a lot of the psychologists, because they were working on the mental level, not on the emotional level with the client, and they didn't take into account polarity and male-female attraction, is a lot of the female psychologists may project their own personal problems onto the man, particularly if the man has been unfaithful. This can be very triggering, right? And so if we're not understanding what is going on with us, what our triggers are in cleaning them up below the surface, we tend to project onto that person. So my job is always to stay extremely neutral. And the power of this program is I get a feeling and a sense of the woman. And I'm able to tell him what the problem is in the dynamic. Because if the man knew what the problem was, he would have fixed it. These men are fantastic problem solvers. Half the problem is doing the detective work of figuring out what the problem is so that we can solve it. And he has the tools to lead her and to solve the problem.
That's quite on the mark. I mean, I know that most of a lot of therapy, I mentor a lot of guys, and I've been in therapy myself. Like, you can get into a tricky situation with a therapist where if they're not skillful and they don't have their own boundaries in check, they start to overlay their context, and you can clearly see them playing aside because their own stuff is getting activated. And I suppose for you, it may be a bit easier in the sense because you're not counseling, right? You don't have the other person there, so to speak, but your stuff could still come up if you weren't aware, right? For instance, if you're dealing with a client who might be involved in infidelity, that could be quite inflammatory, particularly for any woman, right? So I would imagine it takes a lot of skill and you have to be honed in. It probably takes a lot of energy.
So yeah, I do have a few of those clients, right? And I think that's fantastic because usually when there's infidelity, there's a disruption. Something needs to change, right? It's usually the consequence of two parties. Two parties are allowing this. Um, The difference is where I'm doing this work from is not so much on the mind level, which is just the 5%. But a lot of this work is done on the unconscious level. In order for me to work on their unconscious level, I need to also be working on mine. I can only take a person as far as I've gone in that way. And that's really an important part for a practitioner, which sometimes in these areas which are a little bit more regulated in academia, this can be forgotten, right? And it can be overloading to take on so much of other people's energy. The work that I do, because what we're actually doing is we're connecting a man's heart to his mind. And then on a deeper level, we're connecting him to his instincts, which are usually disconnected. Most men who are in leadership positions, particularly in business, they're living on the mental level. They need to disconnect from their heart in order to not feel vulnerable and push through. But that is actually what's creating the disconnect in their relationship. And most men are disconnected from sort of their lower regions, which is the instincts. If a man just ran from his natural instincts, half the problems will be solved. But this can be dangerous in our society because a man's natural instincts can create rage, can create, can send them straight off to prison, right? Those types of men tend to get women very easily. There's a reason for that. There's a reason that the bad boy captures that attention. He's living from his instincts. But the woman usually won't marry him. Why? Because he's unsafe. It doesn't filter through his heart and then through his mind. So most men in your space that you would talk to, they're living from their mind, and occasionally they might make business decisions from their instincts. So what needs to happen? It needs to flick. They need to connect to their instincts, which is their emotions. They need to feel their emotions, but they need to have functional ways to deal with them instead of avoid them, overwork, overdrink, have affairs, do all these things to sort of cope with emotional pain. They need to connect to their heart, and then they can use their mind as the servant to help them, instead of the other way around. And then they become the coach for their wife, who is also masculinized, right? If the man cannot feel emotions, there's no space for her, right? So then he coaches her into her feminine role. He steps into his true masculine role, not the dictator or the passive man at home, but the true leader. This is what a woman wants. Then he coaches her into her feminine. That is how balance is brought into the dynamic, not just the relationship, but also to the family unit. Because whatever is going on between two parents is actually then transferred to the children. But in sometimes a mirroring opposite effects.
Yeah, there's so much wisdom in what you just said. I mean, I've got 2 children, and for a long time, my wife and I were consumed with the children, and then we realized that the children's happiness is a byproduct of our connection. And I think what's happening is we're living in an era where, Esther Perel talks about it, right? Like spontaneity is given to the children now. Like everything we have in the form of playfulness, spontaneity, nothing is left for the partner. And we've kind of adapted this perfect parenting at the expense of what actually creates the strength in the household, right? And it's taken my wife and I a long time because many times I'm coming into the household operating on dictation mode. Do this, do that, right? Like I'm giving commands and my wife is looking at me and she wants me to stop and connect. And, it's taken us a very long time to understand our rhythms. And what's funny though, too, Sasha, is I feel that our relationship in some ways has become more traditional and we become stronger because of that. And I want to touch on that too, because I think that societal context is also changing the way women see themselves and what they feel or think they need versus what they may really need. And like what's your view on that? Because I mean, what I'm hearing from you is that if I can, is that there's a natural tendency we have as men and women, and it's about aligning towards that and effectively leading each other. But that's making assumptions that there are roles.
So we have natural instincts. They're not tendencies, they're instincts. This is our survival instinct. Humanity and in our modern world, we're only getting out of our survival stage now. In the last few generations, maybe this is the first generation of men who don't have to work physically, the second who don't have to go to war, right? So we are still in our natural instincts. We live in a masculine world. Western world is a masculine world. So women have to put on a masculine field in order to survive. Their nervous system cannot handle the pressure. On a nervous system level, the man is a natural leader. His nervous system is more dominant. His energy field, essentially his hormones, there's a biofield, this is scientifically proven now, will pull in his wife and his children, right? But also living in this feminine energy, right? In with children, with women, will also drop his testosterone. So we're actually still hormones, we're still a legacy nervous system from the hunter-gatherer days. So our conditioning, all these ideas have confused our natural tendencies. So we don't want to go back to the 1950s or the caveman days, but we don't want to throw out the baby with the bathwater. These are our natural instincts. There's a reason why all movies have a male hero where he's going forward, right? A woman wants to look at you as the hero, and you want to feel like the hero. You are a natural. The way that a man and a woman have intercourse is the way life occurs. This is the natural dynamic. A man is external, he gives his energy. She receives, okay? Then she takes that energy and she gives back, right? She becomes stronger, she takes it, she gives back, or she creates a child, or she creates love, she creates nurturing. This is the natural instinct, okay? So the woman is not the leader. She doesn't want to lead. She wants to receive and then give her creative energy and her emotion. That's what a man wants to receive. When we mix these roles, we become out of order, right? It's imbalanced. So relationships are not usually broken. They're not toxic. Well, a lot of them are, even the quiet one, because we're not in our instincts, right? We have wounding that we need to heal. That's the purpose of a relationship. We've been lied to by, Disney and pornography that the relationship is going to fill us up, make us happier. No, it's the beginning of our hero's journey. It's there to open up our wounds so that we can heal them and become whole. Okay, it's not an easy process, and it's a you process. Our grandparents couldn't have done this. Their aim was just to survive. That was good enough, right? We want more now. We have everything we need on a security level, even if our mind tells us it doesn't. We now want to self-actualize. It's like Maslow's hierarchy of needs, or, Kundalini activation, or whichever way you're going to look at it. It's all one and the same thing. We want to expand, and this is where the world is going. And this is where relationships are going. That's why there's so much disruption. There's so much sort of this way or that way. There's so much divorce because we want to expand. It's like in business. When there's disruption, there's a lot of opportunity. But if you stay stuck, you stay the same, you don't want to change, it's likely you're going to lose. This is where we need to pivot. We need to learn new skills. And essentially, this is where men are at. Men have never been taught relationship skills. They never needed them. All they needed to do was provide, essentially. Now women want more, men want more. So what's needed is these missing skills, right? So your relationship isn't broken. If you're a man who's not getting his needs for intimacy or respect or any of his needs met in his relation, it's not broken. There's nothing wrong with you. You're just missing steps. Just like you call an accountant or a plumber, if you had a accounting or plumbing issue, you may want to get more information, right, to solve your problem.
I look at younger men and, I look at my younger nieces as well. And I just watch the dynamics occurring with the dating. And what I see a lot of the times occurring is young boys, particularly in their 20s now, that haven't been educated in terms of um, how to be a man and what a man means, and they're kind of confused because is wonderful and open as our society is, it gives a lot of mixed messaging to young men too, as to what an ideal man looks like. And the flip side of that is it confuses women, I think, because I look at the young women that I know and they date these boys, and I think they think, they're looking for fluidity and this kind of openness, but there doesn't seem to be anything of any substance that they can grasp on, so they become resentful or they feel like and I'm just watching this and I actually don't know how to put proper language on it, but do you understand what I'm saying? And how would you actually frame this challenge that I think we're upon?
Well, I'll share an experiment that they did with mice in a scientific lab that may sort of provide an analogy that may be going on to the demographic you speak of or what's going on. Essentially, they put mice in a safe environment where, they gave them food and they gave them everything they wanted. So the male mice didn't have to go out and hunt for the food. They became lazy. They ate, they were more concerned with pleasure and enjoyment and, maybe looking good and sort of, but they didn't develop any hunting skills. Their testosterone wasn't being produced because there was no challenge. There was nothing to overcome. And essentially what happened was the female mice no longer wanted to mate with the male mice. They didn't feel the masculine charge. And the male mice began to mate amongst themselves. Mate.
No way. For real.
So the females didn't no longer wanted to mate with these mice. Why? The hormones, they were not producing the same hormones, right? When we come together, even men in the gym or men and women together on an intimate level, we're exchanging hormones, right? So if we see something that looks like a male, an Adonis, the epitome of a male, but he's not producing that male hormone. There was a very funny coffee ad, I think maybe a decade ago, where a woman sees the, attractive, dark, large, muscly man in the in the supermarket, and he's holding that coffee, and she said, "Where is he from?" or "Where's the coffee?" And he starts talking in a very effeminate way. So obviously, she's about his cup of tea. It's a completely different energy. Her attraction was lost for him. This is the same thing that's happening. So we think attraction is how the person looks, how they appear. Yes, men are visual. It's actually not. It's how the person feels. It's our hormones that create attraction. So what happens in these relationships where there's too much conflict or there's no conflict and it becomes sort of depolarized, they're housemates. There's nothing to do in therapy. There's nothing to talk about because there's no attraction. So really the first part of this process is creating more attraction between the man and the woman. The man stepping into his masculine energy, feeling his instincts, feeling his emotions because he's been disconnected from his emotions. That's why he's a dictator or he can't feel, right? That in itself will create more attraction to come together, and then we can open up some communication. But if there's no attraction, we're not going to solve any problems. So this is much more hormonal than it is figuring out this or that, right? Because men and women are completely different. That's why we're attracted to each other. We're two pieces of puzzle that are not the same that come together. So we need to be complementary as opposed to the same. This is where we lose that drive, we lose that motivation, and we build up resentment.
So you're actually trying to, or you're not trying to, you're actually operating at a hormonal level. You're operating at effectively the biological level.
Yep, and that's the nervous system. Our nervous system regulates everything. We think we do everything. We've created our business, we've done this, we've done that. Actually, most of our life is done when we're unconscious. Below the 95%, our heart beats on its own. We breathe on our own. A lot of the decisions we make are not from our own mind. They're just conditioning, right? Our partner, we don't choose our partner. We attract the perfect partner that's going to emulate the best and the worst qualities of our core caregivers. The woman you marry, the person you choose or that you end up having children with is going to be the exact person that's going to trigger you and open up your wounds. Our
I
unconscious,
agree.
yes, right?
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. I think that an intimate relationship presents the greatest opportunity for growth. And I think that all people can grow in isolation, right? Like, you meet individuals that are doing a lot of self help or they're doing a lot of personal development, but they refuse to allow anyone into their lives or they don't have the capability to, they're not actually allowing themselves the real development because the real development occurs when we open ourselves up, right? And those trigger points get hit. year on, year out, and we have to learn to evolve. And that's been my experience. I think you nailed it. I think that, we have to get in the game to grow, don't we?
100%. A woman for a man is his best vehicle for growth and success. A lot of young, sort of successful men that I've spoken to, their secret to success is basically that they got married young, right? Is their relationship. That's actually the driver for growth. And societies have actually known this for like centuries, for years and years. That often societies do not promote bachelors, right? Why? When they're a bachelor, it creates chaos. There's no growth. Businesses don't grow. Things don't grow. It's very self-serving. It actually creates a lot of conflict. This is why, a lot of events or bars, they try and have a male-female ratio. There's less conflict. This is why organizations, they want to create a culture, a little bit more of a balanced culture. When there's just too much male energy on its own, it's push, it's drive, right? It can create conflict. So that's what we're essentially trying to create in ourselves in a relationship. We're balancing our own male female energies, right? So as much as the man might come to me because of the pain in his relation, because he thinks he wants to make his wife happy or fix the dynamic, it's actually for him, his self-like actualization.
Do you find that if the male or the man can start to adjust his own processes, he can shift the relationship through that, or does the wife or woman have to embark on this path herself?
He pulls her on the journey. She is unconsciously connected to him. They don't even have to be in the same home. As he shifts, as he changes, she changes. What's very common in this is a lot of men I worked with, particularly early on, they had wives who had some dysfunctional behaviors, drinking habits, over shopping, overeating. As they shift their thoughts, their emotions, and behavior and remove some of their own crutches, she changes. She lets go of that habit, right? So this is what we noticed, working with some of the psychologists, doctors, researchers. All of this works on a nervous system level. And we're all connected. We're all through our hormones, through our energy fields. It's called entrainment. This is how flocks of birds fly together. There's no leader. So because the man's nervous system is more dominant, he's the natural leader on a biological level. This isn't any ideology. This is more dominant, right? We see this in silverback gorillas when the leader, the alpha, he is in high stress. He will spray cortisol and all these stress hormones onto the betas and onto the women, and then they get into distress. So, for example, if our president or over the world or the key president, say the United States, he went into meltdown, the whole stock market would crash. The whole world would start to crash. This is the same at home with the man. So he creates chaos when he has internal chaos, even if it's suppressed, even if he looks very cool, calm, collected, and numb on the surface. If he has suppressed chaos, the chaos will reflect in his wife, first of all, and then it will reflect in the children. So yes, as he changes, as he transforms, they transform.
That very much aligns with I have male mentors, and they always have me look at my part first, right? Like if I go to complain about my wife, you know, my mentor will tell me, you want to transform your relationship, make your wife a tea. Your job, RJ, is to love, not to be loved. And he means it in not a literal sense, but he's trying to get me to understand, as the man, I need to give, therefore I'll receive. And, I agree with you. I think that by transforming the way that I operate in my relationship, which is directly within my control, and even if my wife, I used to go and complain to a mentor of mine and say that my wife will kind of oscillate in her moods. He said, your job, RJ, is to remain stable. When she does that, she'll love you more, right? Not to bounce around with her. No one ever told me that. And I think that because, but going back to younger men, we're growing, or we're developing them in a society that seems to have a problem with these instincts you're talking about. It's been labeled as patriarchy. It's been labeled as male toxicity, and males and men aren't being allowed to be and live in those instincts, in my opinion. What's your view on that? Like, just from a societal perspective, and because I would imagine what you're saying could be controversial, to some, right? But particularly people with a more fluid or belief that biology doesn't matter anymore in those perspectives.
Look, those people don't tend to come towards me, and they don't tend to come watch my content. But it is more difficult to work with a man who is more feminized. It's a big challenge, and usually he will not take the initiative to change. And that will keep him very unhappy. So my job essentially is just to help the people that resonate with this. We can't change the whole world, and essentially we live in a few different realities, right? The only thing that we can do is not try and change others, but change ourselves. So in the micro, within ourselves and our relationship, and then in the macro, we don't need to be concerned with really anything outside of ourselves. And what you're saying around men, men don't have initiation anymore. We're disconnected. We wear things on our feet. We're disconnected from the earth, the natural frequencies. This is becoming more common knowledge that we need that connection to nature. It changes our body. We need it for our health. We're not living in natural environments. We're living in boxes, in screens, and we're completely disconnected from our instincts. Our mind is disconnected from our body. If we feel pain, we take a pill to take it away. One of the things that is very confronting that I talk about with my clients in our sessions, especially if they're going through a lot of pain, maybe there's been betrayal, their wife has left them. Society tells us that pain is bad. We need to take it away by buying something, strolling, eating something, taking a drug, drinking something, working. We need emotional pain. Emotional pain cleanses us. And usually what a man is resisting is emotional pain, right? Because there's been no initiation. So in Australian tribes, like the Aboriginals, in a lot of ancient tribes or ones that are now, a boy only turns into a man after initiation. He experiences physical, mental, and emotional pain. This is the disconnect from the mother and the father, particularly the mother. This never happens in our modern world. So the relationship isn't just the man and the woman. It's the little boy and the little girl and the mother and the child. It doesn't work.
Yeah, I mean, I've got a guy up here, and he's in a tricky situation because his wife kind of alienates him from the fathering process, almost to the extent that she has an issue with males. And the challenging part for him is she's kind of involved in this child led development. And so, the kids are being breastfed at 9, 8 years old, and the kids are out of control. They hit her, they smash her, they scream, they yell. And I'm just watching the dynamic play. And when he tries to get in, huh?
He's not leading. He's
No.
leadership, and there's chaos, right?
Yeah. And the irony is she resents the kids. She's frustrated. He feels emasculated, and it's just falling apart. And I think that's an extreme example.
But all that example is happening in less extreme bits all over the place, right? Because a man is no longer leading at home. Either he feels he's leading at work, and because he's bringing in, the breadwinner, he's providing that, he can slack off on his leadership role. That's not the case. Or he is fearful to lead at home. Society has got into his head. This is how he should be. He needs to be more sensitive. The thing is that women never say what they mean. Women have so many layers of conditioning. They're not designed to feel their feelings. They have been trained and conditioned to meet the needs of others and also for their own safety, right? This is also the first or second generation of women who have financial security and have protection against violence in the home. And then, in Australia, Domestic violence is a huge problem, right? So it's still going on today. So a woman can't say what she means. A, it's dangerous, and B, she's so disconnected, right? So a woman, when she says she wants the man to talk more, be more sensitive and express himself, she doesn't want that. She doesn't want to feel a man's fears and feelings that will make her feel unsafe. She wants to expose herself.
That's a massive statement. And I actually agree with you. I think that my relationship is traveling best when I'm physically connected with my wife, which for me means we're emotionally connected. And I don't have to talk to her about what I'm feeling because I'm pretty much good if she's good. You know, to be honest with you,
Natural. It's not natural for a man to talk to a woman or anyone really about his feelings if he's feeling and connected to them. He's out of balance when he needs to vent and vomit and complain his feelings. That's not the man's natural instinct. No woman wants that. She feels burdened, she feels fear, and then she's going to start to take control because she feels that this leader is unstable. So you said something very important at the beginning, that you need to become emotionally stable within yourself. You need to be stable as she is the wave. A woman goes through cycles. She is meant to be like this. This is what creates life. It's exciting for a man. It's kind of the artist, right? A man is straight, stable. He's on a 24-hour cycle. That's the way he's designed to be. He's the container. She's the creativity inside. He's the leader. She's the support system. Right? He's the manager. She's the artist. That's the perfect balance.
yeah. You know, my mentor once said to me, he goes, RJ, I'll never say this in public. He goes, but yeah, in the end of a romantic comedy, if the man jumped into the woman's arms crying and sobbing, nobody would want to watch that shit. Right? Like he goes, the world can say what it wants about its new age preferences, but in and that's so true, right? Like, you know, but look, I found the conversation fascinating. I want to know where our audience can learn more about your work, Sasha. Like, where can they find you?
Yep. So I share a lot of free content on social media, Instagram, mind_method, I think it is. LinkedIn, they can connect with me, TikTok, they can go on my website. I have a free intimacy guide and a free masterclass for men that really helps men to understand these ideas, the premise, what's gone wrong, and what they can do. So that's really the first step, or they can just simply contact me directly.
All right, Sasha. Well, look, don't stress. We'll have all that in the show notes. And I really appreciate the conversation, really valued what we discussed. It was really insightful. And again, thank you for your time.
Thanks for having me.